everyone, my name is Sejal Patel and I'm presenting Module 5 Stakeholder Analysis with Ruth Salisbury and Anna-Louise. This module has 5 components and I'm presenting the first component, which is longest chapter 8. This chapter focuses on developing competence in policy making process. As we all know, health policies affect people, communities, organizations, and various interest groups. This chapter informs how various stakeholders can analyze and influence policymaking process effectively. Public policies affect determinants of health in populations. For example, uninsured people have lesser or no access to health services, which is directly related to their poor health. Accomplishments of many health organizations are affected by health policies. Evidence suggests that many U.S. health organizations were developed under favorable public policies. These organizations fall under 3 categories: primary health service providers, which provide services; secondary provider organization provide resources for primary providers; and interest groups, which represent the collective interests of their members in policy-making process. As defined in this book, policy competence is knowledge, skills, and abilities that allows one to successfully analyze and influence policy-making process. Policy competence needs an in-depth understanding of the context, participants, and processes of particular type of policy environment. Organizations and interest groups use their resources to enhance policy competence of their members. Organizational designs are the pattern of relationships among human and other resources within their domain of responsibilities. These entities with policy interests and resources create formal structures to influence policy-making process. Examples of the structures are national organizations like AMA, state medical associations, universities like Pittsburgh Medical Center, research organizations like Council on Government Relations. Organizations with high interest in health policies establish a government relation department or unit to focus, analyze, and influence the policy-making process. Many large organizations divide government relations department into 2 divisions to focus on federal and state governments separately. Those stakeholders focus on policies that affect their domains. They get greater advantage when they know why and how these policies emerge. Policy analysis require many tools and techniques, which include trend identification, extrapolation, expert opinion, focus groups, and scenario development. The analyzing process involves 5 steps that are interrelated: scanning the environment to identify strategic issues, monitoring these issues, forecasting and the strategic direction for these issues, assessing the issue as opportunity or threat, and diffusing the information to those who can use it to carry out the responsibility. In this process, logic models can help explain relationships among inputs, processes, and achieved results. Organizations are committed to formulate ways to influence policy environment, which are often governed by self-interest. So it is necessary to follow ethical principles. These principles include respect for autonomy, justice, beneficence, and non-maleficence. Effective influence in policy environment depends on power and where and how the focus, where and when the efforts are focused. Organizations use 3 sources of power to influence policy environment: positional power, reward power, and expert power. Organizations focus on policies that have strategic importance for them, and they focus at various levels of policy making: influencing policy formulation, influencing policy implementation, and influencing policy modification. Policy environments are governed by humans, and so it is affected by diverse preferences, objectives, priorities, and level of understanding. This often makes it difficult to influence the environment accurately. Ideal example is how different stakeholders have been holding different opinions about Medicare policy since its inception. This brings me to the end of the chapter and few summarized points. Health policies have profound effects on individuals, communities, and populations. They also heavily influence the workings of health-related organizations. Organizations can analyze the environment by scanning, monitoring, forecasting, assessing, and diffusing information in the entity. Policy environment can be influenced by using power and focusing efforts at various levels of policy making.
Hi, this is Ruth Ann. Sejal's presentation has provided a foundation for Peterson's article. In this article, Peterson poses a possible explanation as to why healthcare reform was passed in 2010 after 6 previous healthcare reform debates over the century. Let's go on to see what circumstances allowed for healthcare reform to finally pass in 2010. According to Peterson, the government is more inclined to act when the public perceives the problems that could be addressed by the government intervention. Peterson identified 3 main areas of perceived problems in the U.S. healthcare system: costs, coverage, and consequences. As you can see from this table provided by Peterson, each of the issues were present and more salient during the Obama administration, making it the ideal time for the passage of healthcare reform. However, national recognition of policy problems does not always lead to government action. Peterson's table number 2 provides a systematic review of political will and consequences, reflecting upon perceived problems, organized interests, and political resources. As displayed, the Obama presidency offered the most favorable political and institutional context, with the greatest number of these components aligning. Peterson also concludes that Obama's leadership approach was open, fluid, and congressionally based. Obama's openness to negotiations ultimately helped neutralize significant stakeholders' components, helping to pass this reform. Next, I will share highlights from Dr. Simon Razinowitz and Dr. Holfin's article. Reflecting back on our previous reading, this article reveals a window of opportunity for the consumer direction movement in the aging community, includes a stakeholder analysis. There has been a movement towards consumer direction for the aging community since the mid-1980s. Since this time, there has been various efforts to build an alliance between aging and younger communities who share similar problems, which are listed here. The Clinton healthcare reform allowed a window of opportunity to begin to unite these groups and establish a unified agenda to support the independence of these groups. Differences between these services on this slide. As discussed by the authors, during this push towards adopting a disability approach for home care services, there are many ethical, practice-oriented, and political issues to consider. Some questions to ask are, will the key goals of younger disabled persons and older populations align? Will providers adjust their lower expectations for the elderly? Can consumer and attendant tasks support autonomy? And many more. Moving forward, we must learn from previous efforts to unify separate populations and address this unified agenda on local, state, and national levels. Further investigation of adopting the disability approach and assessing the effectiveness of various service models is encouraged.
As America's aging population continues to grow, many are showing a preference for less restrictive options of long-term care, specifically care that is either based in one's home or community-based services. Policymakers and patient advocates have stimulated the transition from nursing home to home and community-based services through initiatives that are considered either upstream, whereas they prevent unwanted nursing home admissions, or downstream, which are initiatives that help people return to the community after being in a nursing home. Medicaid has been traditionally biased towards institutionalized care. Participants often become eligible for Medicaid only after they have exhausted their financial resources at a nursing home. To combat this, Congress enabled states to use Medicaid waivers to direct funds away from nursing homes and towards community-based services. Advocates played a major role in the development of legislations that shifted the atmosphere of long-term care. As a result, programs like Money Follows People allowed funds being used towards nursing homes to be used towards patient-preferred community-based long-term care. Then in 2005, the Deficit Reduction Act directed $1.75 billion to a national Money Follows People program. Money saved from serving people in less costly settings could then be used to increase availability of more community-based services. Though some barriers exist regarding the transition for nursing homes to the community, like those pertaining to nursing home length of stay and qualified residents, policymakers have made strides to reform legislation and lower the burden of those barriers. Several states have taken the initiative to implement programs that reduce utilization of nursing homes, but many more have yet to follow suit. The growth of the aging population brings on an increased need of long-term care as well as alternatives to nursing home. Policymakers and advocates have the ability to push policies to develop the infrastructure needed for national change. In addition to considering patient preferences regarding long-term care services, new state strategies to meet long-term care needs have been to employ consumer-directed services approach, giving patients more choice and control over the publicly funded care they receive. Major challenges to the success of budget authority programs have been controlling cost, staffing, organization and leadership issues, a need for new infrastructure, and resistance from key stakeholders. Though challenges exist in implementing consumer-directed long-term care service programs, several states have been successful in sustaining new budget authority programs. In conclusion, stakeholders play a pivotal role in the development of legislation and policies that direct change within our society.